Give me 1 second. I'm
All
actually
right.
gonna let me grab a drink.
All right.
It'll be like 2 seconds.
That's cool. All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 41 of the Fantasy Timeline, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. If you're watching us live right now, as our main man Russ Fisher at Dynasty Outhouse came on, taking forever. Yeah, we got a little delayed this week. I could take the blame for that, but we're here now. Steve, Josh, get out of the pool. It's pod time. But Steve, the pool is so much fun. Sometimes I wish I could pod from the pool. That would be what's up. That would make me happy. As you can see on the other side of the screen, Bill just stepped out to get a quick drink, even though I told him we were going live. So I'll talk to myself for a minute. There he is. He's back. He's got his drink. He's refreshed. He's ready to go. Oh, Bill, you've made me very, very jealous right now. Little Knob Creek for everybody who's listening in podcast form. Little deliciousness for this pod. So
Cheers.
so with is that the round ice cube that I see in there? You're a legend, dude. So
Yeah.
So, Bill, one week of hosting, and now you're starting to enjoy all the finer things in life, huh, my man?
Yeah, like we were talking before, I just spent a couple of hours researching things and putting things into a shopping cart. And then when I went to buy the stuff, my account, it made me make an account. And then when I went back to my shopping cart, everything was gone. So a lot of time was I'm a little stressed, but the Knob Creek will help, I think.
Yeah. So, our our guest is taking care of a little family thing, getting the kiddies to bed before he jumps on. So we'll chit chat a little bit while we wait for him. Last week, Bill, man, that was fire. You had Russ on, you had Rocky on, you had a special guest host, or a special guest on Casey Kasem. I mean, you guys killed it. I mean, it was an awesome show. I listened to it as soon as it dropped. I was on the Massachusetts Vermont border, so I had a little bit of extra time. I fired that bad boy up as soon as it went live, and Bill, I think you've won permanent hosting duties from this point on. You you
No.
were you were great, man.
Well, thank you, but no, I do not enjoy that part of it. No, it was fun. I mean, it was pretty easy with the group we had, since everybody we had is a host of their own podcast.
Yep.
So, I mean, everybody knows, like, at first, you kind of just got to get the direction going so people kind of understand what we're doing. And then all of a sudden it didn't matter. Everybody just kind of jumped in and did a great job. Yeah, it was awesome. I am so not comfortable facilitating, but hey, sometimes you get out of your comfort zone, and maybe it will make you better in other ways. So,
I
we'll see.
mean, it didn't show. I mean, obviously you have Dynasty Outhouse, who is maybe the host of hosts. He is the host I hope to be when I grow up. You had Rocky from the Dynasty Junkies, who is an awesome host in his own right on the Junkies, super knowledgeable. And then Casey just came out there, and she was just spitting fire the entire episode. Drew was on that episode, wasn't he?
And Drew was, yep.
Drew. Sorry, no disrespect. I'm going on very limited sleep, so you might hear some bad takes from me. Which, I mean, honestly, I do that every week. So nothing out of the ordinary there. But and we got
Thanks,
our man Russ. I got you, boo. Russ, special thank you from me personally. I was I was away taking care of some family business. I was up in the northeastern Massachusetts
Is that
area.
a cat or is that a
Uh,
baby or your baby?
I think it might be one of his children with a pair of sunglasses on. Maybe, I don't know.
No. In the background, the noise.
Oh
Was it
no,
your baby?
that's my baby. No cats here.
Okay.
No cats here. So yeah, if you can hear my son, who's usually sleeping by now, is he's given his high impact fantasy dynasty takes as well. So
About as good as mine, so
uh,
perfect.
and Lindsay, throwing you some praise, Bill. Important to get out of the comfort zone. Good job. I mean,
Thank
it
you.
was great. I mean, you killed that Russ. That is his baby with sunglasses. I thought you were talking about the picture. You're talking about the noise coming from my house. So, um, but nah, man, I wanted to throw praise your way because
Thank you.
you know now I've been trying to hide this from people, but now everyone knows that you could do this show without me and probably do it better than you can with me. So I was trying to hide it for a while,
No,
but
no.
unfortunately that got in the way. But you know what? As we're waiting for our guest to jump on with us, we'll hit a little bit of news, and we'll get his feel on it when he comes through, and we'll go from there. So this is the news. So it seems like every tight end that that has ever lived got an extension. Of course, all this stuff happens, the day after our show. It happens every week. We end the show and then, some big news breaks. Somebody did something, somebody got hurt, somebody, and in this case, we had, George Kittle signed an extension to be the highest paid tight end. And then it seemed like 15 minutes later, Travis Kelsey then signed his. Was that a
There-
package in the mail today?
That's for us.
That's for a little Calvin Ridley card action. As I was saying, George Kittle got his extension, and then seemed like 15 minutes later, Travis Kelsey got his. So, Bill, does this change how you feel about him? Is one over the other now? And this was actually kind of a little. It's funny how the dynasty community can create debates out of anything. Um, Even though both these guys got paid and both these guys are the top two at their position, no matter how you want to rank them one and two, it seemed like both of these guys getting paid somehow created this debate about who is the best tight end for dynasty purposes. So why don't we see if we can create a little debate here? And I'll start with you, Bill. Dynasty. Who's your number one? Is it George Kittle or is it Travis Kelsey?
Kittle is just because of age. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
fully expect Kelsey to outscore him for the next couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I can't argue with anybody going either way in that, between those two guys. If the signing of the contract, it probably actually makes me feel better about Kelsey, just because he's older and now that they're locking him up for longer and they believe that he's going to be able to contribute for longer. So that actually, if anything, might bump his value a little bit for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, Kittle, I mean, we fully expected, and we know he's playing for, 6-7 years probably. I mean, I think he turns 27 this year. And so, yeah, I mean, those are the two guys, right? And I mean, really, you could argue maybe who's even third. It's either Ertz or it's Andrews, depending on if you want, if you have a high multiplier for tight end premium, you might want to go Ertz. And then if you don't, just how young Andrews is probably the tiebreaker between those two guys. But yeah, I mean, for me, there are decent ways behind the top two, and because they're the obvious number one targets for their offenses. So
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, same for Kittle, bump for Kelsey.
Yeah, and you went Kittle 1 in Dynasty just due to age. Um I go Kelsey, but I will also agree with you that honestly, like you're nitpicking at this point. I mean, I saw a lot of people take hard stands on one or the other, and I didn't quite understand why. Because, I mean, let's face it. I mean, I kind of always look at Dynasty in that 2 to 3 year window where I think Travis Kelsey will still be the number one. But let's face it. I mean, George Kittle coming in at number 2 isn't, there isn't this massive gap where it's like one massive gap too. I mean, it's like one, a gap wide enough to fit your credit card through, and then, number 2. And you can really, you can throw them either way. I mean, obviously, I think the gap does come after those two guys. I think that's where the gap widens a little bit, and then you get into the Ertz and Andrews. Maybe if you are a Darren Waller believer, you throw him in that kind of tier, that next tier. But that's where I think the big gap occurs, is once you get past those two guys. So if you have them, uh, I think you're feeling good about them. I mean, I don't think you ever felt bad about Kittle, just because he's young. He was always going to be, in that team's plans. He was always the number one option in the pass game. Even with Debo doing some of the things he did last year, you knew Kittle was always going to be the number one. And you, as you said, Bill, and I think you put it very well. You feel a little bit better about Kelsey now, because he's going to be associated with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and that high-flying Kansas City Chiefs offense for multiple years. So that's a good thing. And it's going to be interesting next year, even when we start talking about that second group of tight ends, because the Eagles are going to be like $75 million over the cap next year or something like that. Is one of the ways that they cut money is by releasing Zach Ertz. Is that part of their plans? Darren Waller, might be another guy who we don't see it right now, but I think he's making a little bit of money, and I don't know what his contract looks like, but maybe there's an out for Darren Waller where the Raiders can, cut him as well and save some money. They have Foster Moreau, who a lot of people like. I'm included in that. And I mean, they drafted 2 wide receivers this year, and Lynn Bowden, who is, I mean, they're using him as a running back, but he could be a wide receiver. Maybe the Raiders decide they have enough weapons. They don't need Waller and his oh yeah, that's a good looking card. Bill just lifting up one of his cards, little Zeke love there. I think one of the most disrespected top running backs out there right now. But
So I'm just gonna slide this into the middle of our podcast. So if anybody's listening, if you leave us a rate and review, and DM the Twitter account for the podcast, I have 2 different brands of cards here. I just got bored and I bought some when I went shopping the other day. So I'm just gonna give these away. So like I'll give 2 different away and I'll ship them to whoever wins. So
nice.
So leave us a rate, review, and send us a screenshot of it, and we'll pick a winner sometime this week or next week, I guess.
And if you're listening to this on podcast, Bill has already showed off a Calvin Ridley and a Zeke Elliott. So we're not talking about third string scrubs here. We're talking about elite, top of the top guys. I mean, maybe not Calvin Ridley. Say that just to get Russ going. But you know, a lot of high quality, high end
H2O.
guys there. H2O. So yeah, you know, and the cool thing is that, you know, Travis Kelce. I didn't see this. Our guest put this on the show sheet. Travis Kelce bought a building in Kansas City where teenagers from inner city neighborhoods can safely study STEM. That was the first thing he bought after his extension. So he didn't buy himself anything. He you know, bought a building in the community to allow kids from inner city neighborhoods to study and get an education and do things. And that's awesome. I mean, I
Yeah.
say this a lot, Bill. You've heard me say this a lot. Unfortunately, you know, the Darius Geist stories get plastered all over TV and social media and the web, and stories like Travis Kelce buying a building. And honestly, you know, I would not have known that if that wasn't put on our show sheet. I didn't see that tweet. It was one tweet that got sent out, and you know, I don't know how many other people tweet, but you know, we hear these horror stories, we hear the bad stories about, you know, NFL players and athletes in general. And man, they, you know, there are people out there doing a lot of good things, and we don't, you know. I wish it got as much publicity as the bad stuff is. What
Nobody
I'm
wants to
saying.
hear that though.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because what Travis Kelce is doing is going to have a bigger impact on the world than kind of all of the other gross stories that we hear out there. I was trying to find a politically correct word because the first word that came to my mind was a filthy, dirty word. So trying to do that. And Bill, I also want to give you a lot of credit. I was going to do this later in the show, but so you know, obviously I was away last week. You have Russ on. Russ can't get much bigger than he is. You know, everybody knows Russ, Dynasty Outhouse. You know, you have Rocky on, and Rocky is just a shooting star kind of going to the top. And, you know, but man, you take Casey and you make her a writer for the fantasy footballers, man. You just that was your rub. You did that. And I know Casey listens. Casey, I'm just kidding. I want to congratulate you, though. If you didn't see the tweet, our guest from last week, Casey Kasem, out of over 1,000 applicants, I'll say, she's one of the writers that was chosen by the fantasy footballers. So we all listen to them. You know, we all know that they're kind of, you know, top of the heap when it comes to the fantasy world, and not only just podcasting, but writing and all that kind of stuff. And Casey's a part of that. And I mean, I've been lucky to have been following her for, geez, I don't even know how long now. And she's straight fire, man.
She's
Is,
a cool chick.
yeah, she's fun to have on a podcast. Her writing is top notch. And
Is that okay to say?
What's that? She's one cool chick.
Yeah, is that okay to say?
I'm pretty sure Casey would approve. I don't think Casey would give you any guff for that. So but yeah, so I just wanted to throw a shout out her way and just say congratulations. You deserve it. You've busted your ass to get to where you are right now, and you know, you're going to be
well
just
deserved.
you're going to be going straight up as well. So so on that note, Bill, I think it's time, brother. I think it's time to you know, get to the timeline. What do you think, man? It feels new and exciting for me. I haven't gone to see what was on the timeline in an entire week, and it's fun. So you know, and before we go there, our man, you know, Dynasty FF addict himself. I think being on the timeline cinched it for her. Well, you know, I know the footballers, you know, Andy, Mike, and Jason, they listen. They take hosting tips mostly from Bill, but maybe they've pulled one or two things from me. Mostly from Bill though. And I think you're right, Rocky. I think we did it for her. Onto the timeline, man. So the first one here is from Andy at Andy_Buckler. Marlon Mack is a value in fantasy. Yes, he will be the starter this year, and he's valued like he's barely in the NFL. Stop acting like Marlon is a scrub to boost up Taylor. I'm talking about Jonathan Taylor here. JT will get his time, but not so fast. Go buy some Marlon Mack. So, Bill, let's get into it. What are your opinions about Marlon Mack this year and beyond?
Well, let's start with beyond, because that's where I think that no matter what, he's going to end up being in the Devonta Freeman position. Like, I don't think that somebody's going to like immediately go out and try to sign him to a big dollar contract. So he's going to either have to sign, early in like February or March or whatever, and give kind of a discount compared to what he might expect to get paid, just to ensure that he gets a job. I like him. I mean, I think he's a solid running back. I think he can catch the ball more than they've given him the opportunity to. But I don't think he's much more than maybe a slightly above average back. So, for him to have end up in a situation that was as good as it was last year, I don't think we're going to see that happen anytime, again. So with that being said, I don't like him long term. So then the question is, do I want him on my team this year to help me out, help me win some games? And the problem is, I think that Jonathan Taylor is just better than Marlon Mack. And I don't mind Marlon Mack as a complimentary guy. Maybe they're the 1-2 punch, but I think he's the 2 punch. And then you have a pretty good receiving back in Nyheim Hines that, like, he's not going to get that role. And he was a pretty good, catcher or pass catcher in college, but he's just not getting targets. So I think I am not buying him now. And if I have him on my team, I might be okay just rolling the dice and seeing what's happening, because I don't think that anybody really wants to buy him, to be honest. Like, I might have 1 or 2 shares on my 20 some teams, and like I haven't gotten any offers. So I think you have a hard time getting anything for him now. So maybe it's worth a dice roll. I mean, I don't think anybody's selling him for a third. So you have to pay a second, and I'm not paying a second for him. How about you?
Nah, man, I agree with everything you said. All right. Our guest is here. He's live and in living color. We have Ryan Livergood at Roto Librarian. Ryan, how you doing, man?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. So we just got done talking about Marlon Mack.
Yeah, guys, let me fix my audio here. One second. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
So what's your thought? Is it...
you know what? You make a lot of good points, but I also think that Marlon Mack is being underrated a little bit. If you look at the last 2 seasons, he, 8 touchdowns and 9 touchdowns. So he kind of has a nose for the end zone, close to double digits both years. Almost hit 1,100 yards last year. So he can get the job done. Now, you made a point about Devonta Freeman, and I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate with you. Not necessarily because it's my belief, but I just want to, kind of throw this scenario at you and see what you think about it. What if Marlon Mack is one of the first running backs to get a job? Because he understands that, especially with the free agent class that is, supposed to be like best ever for running backs next year, if he understands that his value is going to be depressed when he's going up against possibly, Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara. And I know some of these guys are going to get signed, so it's not, by the time we actually get to that point, probably at least half of those guys are going to have signed some type of extension. But what if he realizes, like, hey, I'm not going to get big money just based on this free agency class, signs in a good spot, maybe to be the second guy, or maybe even, what if he is, let's say, Leonard Fournette's replacement in Jacksonville or something like that, where he will at least probably be fighting for a role. Not necessarily, I don't think he's going to sign anywhere and be guaranteed to be the guy, but he may be in a position where he is, up against a, fourth round running back or another, kind of low-end free agent guy that got signed. You know what I mean? And I guess that's
that's kind of what I said. Like he'd have to sign early for a low dollar amount, but the problem is, like, okay, yeah, like he's gonna be, well, like, let's say in the free agents he's gonna be fourth best or something like that, right? Well, not only that, there's going to be a ton of teams cutting running backs because of the salary cap dropping. So he might be eighth best. Yeah. You know what I mean? So he might not have the opportunity to sign early because people are going to wait to see who else is on the market. And so he's in a really bad situation. All free agents are in a real bad situation next year. And that's a concern of mine. But he's a guy I wouldn't mind my team signing. Like, let's say Carry-On blows his knee out and they'd end up cutting him. I would have no problem with the Lions signing him as like that second running back behind DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
And so, like, he'll have a job, but it's gonna, like, what's his high end? Is it like a Tevin Coleman where you just kind of go, well, he's going to get some touches. You never know what game it's going to be, that sort of thing. But
yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with everything you said. I just wanted to play a little devil's advocate with you, and it's good that we agree, but it's not good for podcasting that we agree. So I like to go down a little bit different of a path and see. Mm-hmm. But I agree with your valuation as well. Like me personally, I am higher on Marlon Mack than I think a lot of people are, but I'm still not giving up more than a third. A second is too rich for my blood, personally.
Like, will you pay 2/3?
Yeah, I'd pay 2/3. I'd give up 2/3 just for, the dice roll, because, again, here's the thing. This is going to be a weird year. Like, if you haven't figured that out by now, I don't know what to tell you. We're going to see strange things happen. We're going to see guys that we've never even imagined being actual fantasy and dynasty prospects come to light just because of what's going on top of normal NFL injuries and the like. So JT goes down, or JT has to go on the COVID list, and Marlon Mack can show out for a few weeks. Maybe that convinces either the Colts to maybe give him a 1 or 2 year extension, so that maybe Marlon Mack can hit the free agent pool, not in this kind of group of death, to use a soccer term, of the running back class. Or maybe he does ball out for 6 weeks because of injury or something else, and a team pays him more than maybe they should. Because let's face it, as much as we talk about teams acting rationally, we see free agents get signed every year, and we go, what the hell just happened here? How did this guy get all this
Right.
money? So, I mean, he could put himself in a situation like that as well.
So Ryan Livergood has popped in. I think we got the audio issues resolved. At Roto Librarian.
Let's try it, guys. Do I sound okay?
You sound
You
good,
sound
bud.
good.
I had to abandon the fancy setup, and I'm just going with the earpods, so that seems to work better.
Me too.
Sorry about that, guys, and sorry I had delayed bedtime, but I'm happy to be here. Talking about Marlon Mack. So, guys, the thing with Marlon Mack, and maybe you discussed this already, I think he could be a valuable piece to have on your fantasy rosters this year, maybe beyond. But I don't know if I want to pay what I have to pay for him, and maybe you can get him for nothing. But I still think when I plugged it into the Dynasty trade calculator the other day, he's worth a late second round pick in a super flex league. I don't know that I want to necessarily pay that for him. I think I'd still rather have that second round pick. So for me, it's just about cost. I mean, if I could get him cheaply, someone that has totally discounted him, and I'm sure there are people that have, sure. But beyond that, not a guy I want to invest in. Fourth round pick. He's just kind of a guy, right? So not that he couldn't be valuable, but I just don't see a rich dynasty future for him. So
2/3 was kind of like where we were at. Is that something you would be willing to pay for him?
I guess it depends on situation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know he could be a guy you could acquire, and theoretically he could win you some weeks. He could plug him in. I just think that JT is going to take over that backfield. I mean, he's clearly the superior talent. You've already heard the camp reports. He's just going to take the job and run with it. So I think Marlon Mack is simply a handcuff, and beyond this year, who knows? So I just not a guy I'm real interested in acquiring, frankly.
Yep.
And to piggyback off of that, our man Sam Stompy Lane at Stompy the Bear, are you concerned about any of the rookies who are competing with vets due to lack of off-season work and preseason games? Are you investing in the guy we just talked about, Marlon Mack, Ronald Jones, Kerryon Johnson? So Bill, one of your Lions is on the list. So why don't we start with you? We've already kind of talked about Marlon Mack and how we feel about him. Are you jumping on the Rojo train, especially with Bruce Arians saying he looks spectacular? He learned how to pass protect. He's all rocked up. We haven't seen a calf or thigh picture yet. I think that will make him give him first round ADP if we can get a picture of one or both of them, preferably both. I think that will definitely boost him into the first round. Or your man Kerryon. Are you trying to invest in those guys?
So no, I mean, I'm not investing in Kerryon. I have him on some teams, not a lot, but I think he might do better now as like a secondary back because he's not going to have to carry the load. So, but how much is that worth? So that's the question. And I'm not going to go out and buy shares of him because I feel like I'm not going to get any plus results from him. So that leaves Rojo. Like Mark, we already talked about Mac. I'm not going to do that. So it leaves Rojo. He's at least in a situation where we're not 100% confident that there's a better talent on the roster. So he is the one that I would consider adding just situationally. It sounds like he put a lot of work in this offseason. He added some weight because he was always a smaller back. And so I think that's at least shows something. And everybody's worried about his pass blocking. Well, if he put all his work in to get his body better or bigger, maybe he put in some work to improve his pass blocking. And so, I mean, some guys, it just takes a minute to, figure stuff out. They're slower at picking things up. And maybe that's him. Am I going out and spending what I have to pay? Probably not. But like I'm saying everything I can good about him just because situationally it's at least something you got to take a look at. But of the three, he's the guy that I would consider.
And our man Rocky Dynasty FF Addict, Rojo with the green sick emoji face. So as you know, if you listen to the Junkies or have heard Rocky on our show a couple times, he is firmly in the Never Rojo camp. So Ryan, what are you thinking about Rojo and Carry On?
Carry On is a little bit intriguing to me, and I think he's a guy that you could probably get at a discount right now. Although I do worry about his injury history. I kind of believe in the injury prone label, and I just worry that it says a lot that the Lions went out and they got Swift and drafted him, as tremendous a talent as he is. So I think that says a lot about Carry On Johnson. So I worry about that. And then Ronald Jones, I'm looking at it as an opportunity to sell him because I made the mistake of picking up a couple of Ronald Jones shares. So I'm gonna maybe exploring selling him now, but I want to wait. I think he's going to get the starting role, and hopefully the first couple of games he pops off, then I want to flip him. He's just one of the things I don't like about Ronald Jones. I just don't think he has that pass catching upside. I just think that if anything, he's going to be a 2-down back. That he has 8 3/4 inch hands, and one of the things that Will Greenwood, my co-host on the Fantasy Joes, always jokes about is I'm a hand snob, and that goes not just for wide receivers but for running backs as well. So those are teeny tiny hands. That's 14th percentile. So I just I think Ronald Jones is maybe a 2-down back, and I think it's just a lot of hype right now. But I think now is a good time to consider selling him because he's getting pumped up. A lot of the redraft podcasts, I've listened to Dave Richard on the CBS podcast. He's really pumping up Ronald Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that hype because I've got those guys on my roster. Now I can actually flip them and maybe get something of value.
Yeah, and Bill, we have some new vernacular to use on the show. Hand snob. We have to try to work that in as much as we can. Yeah, Carry On's an interesting prospect. I think obviously out of those 3 guys, even Marlon Mack included, he's probably the guy you can get for the cheapest. Bill and I talked about this as soon as the draft was done. I think I may have even DM'd him this. We may have talked about it on the show, but I said, man, here's the time to buy Carry On because people are probably, DeAndre Swift, who was a guy that a lot of people had as their number 1 prospect going into the draft, even over JT, even over CEH. If they got Carry On, they want to bail. They're like, Swift is here, Swift is taking over, Swift is getting 100% of the snap share. That's what we do in our minds. We immediately go to worst case scenario and then we make that the narrative. So he's probably the cheapest guy. I wouldn't mind having him on my team probably for what the price is right now. We already spoke about Marlon Mack. Rojo's interesting because a week ago, I feel like there were probably a lot of guys like our boy Rocky who are never Rojoers who maybe, either in a startup got their hands on Rojo or maybe Rojo was part of a thrown in another trade and they were looking to bail on Rojo. And I think the price, you maybe in certain leagues could have gotten him for a good price, as our man John Bauer says, price dependent. But now, the Rojo hype train, as you said, Ryan, guys from CBS, pretty every big outlet, lots of small outlets. If you go on Twitter, Bruce Arians every day is like, Rojo's the best running back I've ever seen, and he's amazing, and we love him, and he's never coming off the field, and he's learned how to pass block. And now, even if you have a Rojo hater with a share of him, I don't think you could get him for a price for what he will probably produce for you on the season. We talked about this a few weeks ago when we had James the Brain on. Bill brought up the fact that Rojo ended up as RB, I think 26 or 28. You said, Bill.
Yeah, it was like right at that the cusp of a 2-3.
Right. So we're talking about best case scenario. We're talking about a low end running back 2. Probably more likely as a high end flex running back. And am I going to pay a 2nd round pick for that? I don't know. A week ago, I feel like I may have been able to get a better deal on him, and now I feel that the price has bumped up with all of the training camp hype. So now I feel like
probably has.
I probably won't get him for a price that I am cool with based on what I predict him producing.
And I think I'm a little. I think what I'm going to start doing is say how many shares I have, like when we talk, just so people know, like kind of at least where, like even though I'm saying a side of something, like that doesn't necessarily represent how I really, like feel by adding them to my team. So I have 0 Rojo shares in my 20-some teams. So that kind of tells you where I'm at with him or where I have been at. So, yeah, I think he's always had a slightly inflated value compared to where I felt like what he was worth at the time. So, but yeah, with this hype, man, I agree, Ryan. He's probably more ideal for the people who want to move him than want to acquire him.
Ryan, how many Rojo shares do you have?
I off the top of my head, I think I have 2. I think I have 2 shares, and I'm also in like 20 plus dynasty teams last time I checked. So just a couple of poor decisions in hindsight. I've learned a lot. So I believe I've been playing dynasty for about 4 years, and each year I learn a lot. And now I feel like I'm finally really know what I'm doing. And we'll talk about bad trades later, I believe, and I'll share one of my bad trades and my thought process at the time. It just illustrates how far I've come, I think.
And Ryan, you and I have been playing Dynasty for about the same amount of time, and this is why we like to get guests who are smarter than I on this show, because I still don't know anything about Dynasty. So
it's true.
At least, I mean, Bill can attest. He's seen me in action. That
was a sarcastic comment just for the listeners, so they know.
And Rocky, on one more Rojo point on the way out, says, you want someone to love you the way James the Brain loves Rojo. And that's true. That's true. We all want that in life because,
yes,
I mean, James had me loving Rojo a little bit after that episode. So I should have probably bought the shares while they were still cheap and sold them now once all the hype came out. But that was my mistake. So now we're going to move on. We have our next tweet here from Tonton 365 at Ton 365. Who do you like more in 12-team dynasty or 12-team PPR dynasty? Devin Singletary or David Montgomery? Ryan, since you're our guest, why don't we start you off here? Are you team Devin Singletary or team David Montgomery?
I think for Dynasty, I hate to say it, I don't necessarily love either of these guys, but I guess I'm team David Montgomery. I am a Bears fan, full disclosure. But I think with David Montgomery, you're locked into a guy that's going to get, 250 touches this year in Chicago. He's definitely going to be their the first 2 down back. I think he'll get some looks on 3rd down. I don't think Tariq Cohen is a particularly good pass catcher. If you ever watch Tariq Cohen as a Bears fan, he's just not very good. And people hype about, what a PPR machine he can be and talk about his rookie year, but I don't think he's a very good pass catcher. I think David Montgomery's better. So I hope the Bears utilize him better. I do worry about the Bears offensive line, but I think with David Montgomery, what you're getting volume, if nothing else. Maybe you're getting a running back 2. Next couple of years, I just don't see the Bears adding to the backfield unless they have to. Any pieces that might threaten him. I don't know that they have the draft capital to do that, honestly. And I like Devin Singletary. I think he's interesting, but I just worry about that backfield. I think Zach Moss is going to be a decent pro, and I think he's going to be just annoying enough to take away just the touches that Devin Singletary would need. So for me, it's David Montgomery. Don't really love either of these guys, though.
All right, Bill. David Montgomery, Devin Singletary. Who you got?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's David Montgomery. You can't pass up on that volume. And to the Tariq Cohen thing, I mean, it's really that just he gets a ton of targets, and that's what is people like about him. But I agree, and people hope that he's super dynamic because of his size, because he can jump out of a pool or whatever he did, and
human joystick,
flip over, jump. What was it? He did a backflip and caught 2 footballs or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Like that stuff people remember, but I mean, David Montgomery, yeah, I mean, you can't pass up on all those touches. And the issue, like, I like Devin Singletary better as a running back, probably. I think he's a little bit more dynamic, but I mean, you have a quarterback that's scored 8 and 9 touchdowns rushing, and then you have a guy that they just drafted that they say is going to play the Frank Gore role, who got like all the touches at the goal line. So all the valuable touches are going elsewhere, at least theoretically. So, I mean, as a player, who do I want on my team? Probably Devin Singletary, but I mean, you can't deny the opportunity that Montgomery has.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make it 3 for 3 here. I'm gonna go with David Montgomery. Yeah, it didn't look good last year. I think we can all agree to that. But Chicago made no effort to bolster the running back room. No draft picks were used. No, free agents were signed. They pretty much said, we're going to stick with this guy. So obviously the team has faith in him. And, it's just about, I guess, hoping that, he gets better this year. He gets a little bit more efficient. I agree with you as well. Tariq Cohen doesn't really affect David Montgomery all that much. I mean, Cohen's out there to be the receiving back, out there on some gadget plays. He's not out there to, run between the tackles and get you 3 dirty yards on 3rd and 3. That's not his role in the offense. And Devin Singletary, I have a buddy of mine who just got into Dynasty last year, and he was trying to trade me Devin Singletary pre-draft, and I said, I don't want him because I have a feeling that Buffalo is going to do something to bolster the running back room. Bill, you talked about Frank Gore had like 11 touches inside the 5-yard line, and I think he converted on like 2 of them or something like that. Like, he was ridiculously inefficient within the 5-yard line. And now they just said, yeah, we're going to let you go, Frank.
Well, I'm sorry. That's why Adam Gase signed them.
Because obviously, yeah, that's what
so
that's what he needs.
All the goal line touches.
He needs another guy who can't score from the 5-yard line, because he doesn't have a team full of those already. But and they let Frank Gore go, and then they said, oh, hey, why don't we just get this Zach Moss guy who had a little bit of pre-draft hype. If you're on Twitter or you listen to their podcast, the Ball Blast girls, Kate and Michelle, love Zach Moss. Yep. They think he's a stone cold stud. And while I don't have those type of feelings about Zach Moss, I think he'll be a little bit more efficient than Frank Gore from the 5. So, Bill, like you said, I mean, if Josh Allen is vulturing touchdowns and Zach Moss can actually be, 50%, never mind the 10% that Frank Gore was, where does that leave Devin Singletary? Is he one of those guys that runs from the 20 to the 20 and then it's Josh Allen and Zach Moss time? They've also, they also traded for Stephon Diggs. So are they going to throw a little bit? There's a lot going against Devin Singletary. So I guess, long story short here, I'm going to make it 3 for 3 and go with David Montgomery. Cool. So we knocked that one out of the way. And that was a poll, by the way. And the poll actually ended up being a lot closer than I thought it would. David Montgomery did win, but it was about 56 to 44 in the vote. So pretty close for a Twitter poll.
Yeah, I think that's because Devin Singletary is just definitely more a dynamic player. You saw him make dynamic plays last year, and when you watch the Bears and David Montgomery did not have a lot of dynamic plays. That one preseason game, but that was it. So, yeah, you want to invest in the player that makes the big plays, the highlight plays that are going to show up on SportsCenter, not a guy like David Montgomery. Hopefully, we'll see some of those this year. The Bears' offense can't be worse, can it?
Yeah, I mean, you got to hope that their offensive line gets better, right? Like, I mean, that was part of the issue. So, I mean, even if nothing changed, like I'm actually speaking out of ignorance. I have no idea if they lost players or added players, but you have to think that even if they have the same 5 guys, that they're just going to improve based on chemistry.
Yeah, the big investment the Bears made was, I believe it's Juan Castillo is their offensive line coach. He was the offensive line coach for the Eagles. So we'll see if coaching can improve. I mean, their coaching room got better all around. So we'll see. I'm not super optimistic. I think at the end of the day, it has to do with quarterback play. The offensive line was bad, but let's. I don't think Mr. Trubisky is going to win the job. I think Nick Foles will, and let's just hope he can do something. So we don't need to talk about the Bears. So avoid the Bears in fantasy, okay? Other than Allen Robinson, perhaps, but otherwise, we don't want to invest those guys.
Heart hands for him.
Oh yeah, we're a very pro Allen Robinson podcast. So grab him, and Ryan and I will have to discuss this later. I actually think that I do think that Mitch can win the job. I don't know if he can keep the job, but I think he starts with the job. So
all the beat writers in Chicago, say that he is the favorite because he's here and Nick Foles hasn't been here. So he probably will get a shot. And I guess if you want to take a flyer in a Superflex league on Mr. Trubisky, I think you could get Mr. Trubisky for next to nothing for quarterbacks in Superflex. So I'm not suggesting you go out and do that. I will not be doing that. I have way too much Mr. Trubisky on some of my Superflex teams. But if you want to just if you want to throw a dart throw at a quarterback, you could probably get Trubisky on the cheap.
With all the political ads going on, we'll just say we do not endorse this message.
That's right.
Don't go get yourself Mitch Trubisky unless you like to live dangerously. And honestly, you could probably hedge your bet and get Nick Foles for even cheaper if you really want to go down that rabbit hole. But we don't endorse that message.
So I just had a startup that it actually stunned me how late those two went. And a guy actually traded for the pick right behind him so he could just shore up the a quarterback position. And so he took both of them right in a row. And I got to find out what round that was because it was pretty late in a startup.
Well, while you're looking that up, Bill, we'll move on and then just jump in when you do find it because now I am curious to see where those guys are going because I've done some startups this year, but Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles were never on the radar. So
it was the 15th round, so it wasn't quite as late. It wasn't quite as late as I remember, but it's still pretty late for starting tandem.
Yeah. And how many teams are in that league?
It's 12.
It's a 12-teamer. Okay, yeah. So that's late. That's that's a lot of guys. I mean. This is probably your Marcus Mariota area, probably around there where you.
I should look to see who the next quarterback taken was.
Because those are always interesting spots in Superflex drafts when you're just kind of
Jacob Eason was the next one. Eason was the next quarterback, and then Taysom Hill. So that's how far they dropped.
Yeah, I'm playing in the IDP Guys Invitational League, which is redraft, Superflex, and obviously it has IDP players. So Foles went in the 22nd round in my division. So
because
that's with IDP. Players. But still, those are the last two starting quarterbacks off the board. And in best balls I've done, you can always get Trubisky and Foles late. So. Maybe as best ball flyers, you want a little quarterback depth, you can get them real late.
It's good to know.
There you go. So this next one here is from Zach Smith at FF Wu-Tang Forever. Have you guys ever made a trade that just fucking haunts you? You'll be going through your day and just randomly go, fuck, why? So, Bill, I know I did the Irish accent a huge disservice.
Fuck.
So I'll let you start on this one. Is there a trade that just haunts you? It makes you feel bad. It makes you cry.
No, I'm usually pretty decent at trades. If I feel like I'm not at least sold on the decision, I'm not going to make it. Like I'm pretty, like I am much more willing to I'm not going to make a trade to make a trade. So it needs to make sense for me. And I'm typically somebody who doesn't regret their decisions because you're basing your decisions off of the information you have at the time. Like I've made really bad decisions for like my personal business, like in retrospect, you know what I mean? Because like the economy tanked after I decided to spend a bunch of money for my business. And, it's like, oh, that was a bad decision. Well, yeah, now it's a bad decision, but it wasn't a bad decision when I made that, that choice. So like, I don't really beat myself up about them. I mean, though, like just looking back, like what was my worst trade? And maybe that was like, it was the last year of Jordy Nelson with Green Bay, and I had Kareem Hunt, and it was his rookie year. And Jordy was still a pretty, a pretty hot option at that time. And I mean, he had a crap year that year. And of course, we all know what Kareem Hunt did. And it was a team that I was in the playoffs. I lost in the semifinals. It was like a 32 team leagues with 3 copies of players. So, it was one of those things where it hurt me like at the end of the year. So that's the one that comes to mind. That was a bad trade. And like, that's always the one that pops in my head talking about bad trades, but I don't really regret trades because I just know that there's going to be bad ones and there's going to be good ones.
What about you, Ryan? Is there a trade that just haunts you?
Well, maybe not haunts me, but it's a bad trade. But I think Bill makes a great point that you're going to make good trades and bad trades. For every horrible trade you make, you probably have one that's a home run, and that's part of the trading game. If you don't have any bad trades, you're probably not active enough, frankly. And you can't dwell on it. You have to learn. So I'll talk about a trade I made a couple of years ago. So I'm in this league that Nathan Powell started. It's League with No Name. And it's a pretty cool league because you are locked into either like different college affiliations or NFL affiliations. So my college affiliation, for example, is the Field. So basically, non-Power 5. But in any event, it's kind of has that unique aspect to it. So I was a strong contender. And I was weak at quarterback. This is back in 2018 in November. So I traded a package of Josh Allen, Cooper Kupp, who was injured, and a 2019 third for Mitchell Trubisky and MVS. Right. So that's a horrible deal. Yeah. But what I learned from that was that I was kind of chasing a title, right? I was like, oh, I'm this far apart. I just lost one of my wide receivers, MVS. He's put together a stretch of 3 weeks of. I remember he had that like window where we thought he was the next big thing with Aaron Rodgers. So it was then. So I didn't really believe in him, but I'm like, well, if he can do this rest of the year, and Mitch Trubisky was playing really great at that point in time. Josh Allen was not. He proceeded to pick up the pace and have a great finish to that year. So I just could have kept him and it would have been great. And I ended up losing the championship, not because of that trade, but I had some bad luck. I did win the next year. But the lesson from that story is that be careful, when you're in championship contention. You make smart trades. Don't chase titles. Don't give up assets like Cooper Kupp because they're injured because you need to add another wide receiver. So it was a good lesson. And I haven't made any trades quite like that since then. When I'm making trades at the trade deadline, I'm looking for cheap help. So this year in that same league, I needed some quarterback help, and I acquired Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, for like a 3rd round pick or something like that. That's the kind of trade you want to make because even if until he blew up in my face, so what? I lost the 3rd round pick. So that's my example of a trade that I still look back and I think, oh, that was just a horrible deal. But I learned a lot from it, so it was worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah. So before I bring up mine, our boy Rocky traded 2 seconds for Washington running back Robert Kelly. One was the 205, which ended up being Kareem Hunt. That's tough, but I mean, you know what? It's like you guys were saying. Robert Kelly was a thing at one time. We laugh now because we're kind of like Robert Kelly. That's funny, but
It's like the Jordan Howard of like a few years ago, right? Like
yeah,
the
like
guy that didn't get any catches, but he was getting a ton of volume early.
Well,
right.
that was Fat Rob, right? I don't think anyone knows him as Robert Kelly. People are like, "Who's Robert Kelly?" If you say Fat Rob, you remember
Fat Rob.
Fat Rob.
Yeah.
And it's like you guys said, you know, we look at it now years later and we're like, it's a pretty bad trade. But we, you know, especially with trades that end up being that far back, we forget what the climate was at the time. Fat Rob was a thing. I mean, he started as Robert Kelly for a couple weeks, then he turned into Fat Rob because he was actually doing a little bit. And you know, yeah, at the time too, you're like, 2 seconds, you know, what am I going to end, you know, and we hear about hit rates, you know, first round picks are only a 50% hit rate. And then you know, you get into the second round and I think that ends up being like a 30% hit rate. So you're thinking, all right, like I could take 2 cracks at something that only has a 30% hit rate, or I can get this guy who's actually doing something right now. You know, now obviously, you know, one of those picks turned into Kareem Hunt and you go, why did I ever make that trade? But you know, it happens that way sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
I'm. It's tough for me to come up with one, and it's just because, and Bill can attest to this. I'm a very hard person to trade with. It's my analytical side. I'm a numbers person.
Your fear of making a mistake.
You know, I stick to values. Maybe, you know, I'm not very flexible with values, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm hard to trade with. I'm like trying to I did trade a package that was highlighted by George Kittle for a package that was highlighted by Dalvin Cook, and now I'm kind of looking at that and I'm going, I should have just kept Kittle, especially because this you know, it's a slight tight end premium 1.25. And, you know, I got like Brandon Cooks back in the deal, which I mean, he's such a wild card, and you know, but I mean, and I know that doesn't sound like a terrible deal, but I I guess that it prevents me from making a lot of trades, but it also prevents me from making bad trades because usually I'm kind of like, my value says this isn't good, so I don't do it, and I'm very rigid, which I mean is a weakness of mine. I don't want to promote it as a strength of mine. It is a weakness of mine, but yeah,
I don't think it's a weakness necessarily. I think it's just a matter of finding like what your comfort level is, right? Like if your risk tolerance is low, then rigidity is not a bad thing. Whereas like if you are, you know, shoot from the hip kind of person, then yeah, being rigid would probably be a bad bad philosophy. But you know, it's just a matter of figuring out like everybody's natural frequency is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, I become a lot looser in trades over the last few years because I'm like, yes, this makes sense. And, you know, even if it's like a 5% bump on my side, in my opinion, I'm going to do it. Where before it was like, oh, I got to feel like this is definitely helping me.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of, you know, figuring out what you're comfortable with. And this is never a right or wrong answer. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of like how you're built and how you deal with that kind of stuff. And so like I love how people tell you like you're like the comment, if you're not this, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
No, that's not right, because everybody's reality is different, right? Everybody's different. And you know, people need to figure out what we tell you to do. If you're not comfortable doing it, don't do it. You know, it's that easy. And you know, as you get into playing more years, like, you know, Ryan says he's playing 4 years, you know, Josh is playing 4 years. I maybe a year or two more than that. You know, you figure it out. You know what you like. You know how you want to build your teams typically. You're to the point where you can go, hey, I'm going to build this team completely differently because I just want to try something different. You know, and I've been doing that for years just because I get bored if I'm building everything the same.
Mhm.
And so like me on my soapbox right now because of this Knob Creek. And so yeah, like I, do you, but you got to push your, like, it's kind of like me when I was the host last week. You got to push yourself out of the comfort zone every so often just to, make sure that you're not stagnant.
All right, Bill. So I expect to see some trade offers in Superflex Army too to get me out of my comfort zone. Actually, I mean, I will talking about Superflex Army too. I did have the potential to make a bad trade, and Bill prevented me from doing it by not accepting my trade.
I wasn't gonna let you do that. It was with me, right?
So, it was with you. So
yeah.
During the draft process, I was big on Brian Edwards. So in our rookie draft, Bill took Brian Edwards, and I turned around and said, "All right, Bill, I'll give you a 2021 second and N'Keal Harry for your Brian Edwards." And he said,
pretty hefty offer.
Yeah, pretty hefty offer. Yeah.
He said no. He said, I'm not going to do it. And I said,
well, we had Zach Reed on, who was like very much a Edwards, truther, and
might be the only person on the planet who likes him more than I do.
Yeah. So like, it's always easy, like when you have a guest, like to get caught up in their passion for something. And so I think that's kind of where Josh was coming from. And I'm like, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Like there's just no way I was going to accept it, especially because this was the first year of the season or of the league. I'm like, man, I am not going to, like destroy something this early as the commissioner. So, I mean, it's not that bad, but you know what I mean? Like you don't, I hate like making terrible lopsided trades personally.
And it's funny because the next day I was like, man, I'm kind of glad Bill didn't take that deal. Like, don't get me wrong. If he would have taken that deal, I would have been like, man, I'm glad I have Brian Edwards. And then I would have been like,
yeah,
well, maybe I paid a little bit too much.
That's a hype thing, like,
but oh no, I like him. By the way, anyone who's in a league with me, if you have Brian Edwards, you can send me a trade offer. We'll figure it out.
So hey, let's just go to the Raiders for a second. Ryan, how do you feel about, like, who would you envision to be the target leader for the Raiders this year?
Oh man. Well, I mean, I think the easy answer is Darren Waller, right? I mean, I think that, but you're talking about the wide receiving.
Well, no, I meant anybody, and I agree it's probably Waller. But
I think it's probably Waller.
After that, who do you think?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't know. And one of the things that's interesting about the Raiders, there were on The Athletic. I don't remember the writer that wrote the article, but they did ranking the 32 top offenses, and the Raiders last year, I don't remember where they were ranked, but way higher than I remember them being ranked. I don't remember what the criteria they used, but it made me think that maybe we shouldn't totally undervalue the Las Vegas Raiders, because I think there are a lot of intriguing guys on that team. I think Ruggs. I know that, like, analytics people, they that Ruggs just was like, he's a terrible draft pick. I'm super intrigued by what he can do, how they can use him. And I think Edwards is great as well. I think if it wasn't for his injury history, he probably would have gone higher in the draft and had more draft capital spent on him. So I think Tyrell Williams could even have a sneaky good year, believe it or not, as a guy that's a little bit undervalued. So I'm not answering your question.
It doesn't matter. I mean, but you're saying what I kind of expected in a way, like, I mean, the wide receivers, you just don't know, right? Because it could be any of those guys. But I agree with you. Tyrell could be a guy. Like, I mean, side note, I've always loved Tyrell. Like, he's always been a cheap option for a guy who can get a decent amount of targets. Yeah. And they paid him to be a wide receiver. It's not like he's not, and he was hurt for most of the season last year, So, like, if you want a cheap player, he might be the way to go, just because for this season, because you can't bank on two rookies to all of a sudden just be the guy, right? Like, so, or the guys. So even if there's only one other guy that gets targets, I think that he might be a decent ad late. You could probably pay a third rounder and get him.
Oh, I think so. Pretty easy. Yeah.
And Go ahead, Ron.
No, I just think the Raiders are probably more intriguing than most of the dynasty community we're giving them credit for. What do you think, Josh?
And it's funny because I was thinking about this earlier today because I keep a spreadsheet of guys that I like, that I want to target in leagues and stuff like that, just to give me something to look at. And
could you post that on Twitter, please?
Absolutely. And I was going through my quarterbacks, which is a short list because every league I play in is super flex. So I know if I, ask for most of the names that people like, I'm gonna have to pay an arm and a leg to get them. But I was looking through and I was like, why isn't Derek Carr on this list? Because we just talked about it. Darren Waller's in town. We think, the rookies, can be good, maybe even if not for 2020, but for 2021 and beyond. Josh Jacobs, everyone has him high on their running back list. So that's obviously going to loosen things up a little bit. They have a pretty good offensive line. Why do we hype up all these other players and then we kind of go, Derek Carr is just, he's not going to be good. Like I don't think both things can be true. We can't say there are possibly 3 good receiving options on that team, a good running back, a good offensive line, and then say, but the quarterback is not going to be good. Either we're wrong about the weapons or we're wrong about the quarterback. And I was like, what will Derek Carr cost you, in a super flex league? Not going to be a ton. It's not going to be the same as trying to get, anyone in the top 15 probably. So,
Carr
why not?
At Deontay Johnson in my startup, like Carr and Deontay Johnson were at like basically the same, like 100th pick.
100th pick. Okay.
Well, I think the easy answer to that are a couple of different factors. I think Derek Carr was not this first round quarterback, so he doesn't have the high draft capital that was spent on him. Then there's that narrative that they signed Marcus Mariota to put pressure on Derek Carr, and Gruden gets impatient with his quarterback. So clearly that once Derek Carr doesn't perform, I think a lot of it's narrative street. People hear that narrative, they start to buy into it. It's like, oh yeah. Derek Carr is super risky. He's going to lose that job. Mariota is going to take over. I'm not going to touch him. And he last year he didn't have a particularly strong season. I think if you owned him on your teams, you were disappointed. So I just think all these factors build up, and certain guys just have a stigma that surround them, rightly or wrongly, and they just can't get rid of it.
They're just not like sexy.
Yeah, like Jarvis Landry, for example, always undervalued. Yeah. Everyone just he always slips down in drafts, and he just produces. I remember on the Fantasy Joe's podcast last year, we were talking about Jarvis Landry with my co-host. I was saying he's going to have this good year, and I think I made a prediction. He's like, no way he's going to repeat that, and lo and behold, he did. He reached the targets I thought he would reach because he just does it year in and year out. So I think Derek Carr is just one of those guys. He just has that stigma, rightly or wrongly. He's not going to keep that job. So why would you invest in him? Because why would you want a non-starter? That's my theory anyway.
And you bring up good points, and I laughed during the Marcus Mariota narrative because it's been all over the place. And at the end of last season, we were like, this is the guy that not only couldn't hold off Ryan Tannehill, but then once Ryan Tannehill got in, made that one of the most efficient offenses in the league. So now this is the guy that apparently is supposed to beat out Derek Carr, who, let's face it, I don't think a lot of people had high hopes for the Raiders last year, and they were okay. They weren't great. They weren't good. They didn't make the playoffs, but I think a lot of people had a worse record in mind when they mentioned the Raiders than what they actually ended up with. So, that part, it always made me laugh when Marcus Mariota gets brought up.
Yeah, and I read somewhere where actually Derek Carr was looking to buy a house like in the same neighborhood as Gruden. So, he obviously believes he's, there for a while. or why would he be looking to buy a new house? I mean, maybe that's just a stupid narrative, but I mean, as at least some indicator.
It's a better narrative than Marcus Mariota is going to take the job from Derek Carr. So put it out there. Give people the information. Let them do with it what they will. But that's at least a better narrative than Marcus Mariota taking anyone's job. I mean, he ain't doing it. Let's face it, people. All right, we're gonna throw one more out there. This is from our man cousin Lyler, cousin Lyler at Del_co_. Got an offer sitting in my inbox. Dynasty full PPR 14-man league. AJ Dillon, Jalen Reagor, and Justin Jefferson, or Miles Sanders. And this is very interesting considering the news that came out today that Miles is week to week with, it looks like, some kind of lower body injury. So Ryan, why don't you go first? Do you like the package of rookies, or are you on the Miles Sanders Express?
So 14-man, are these 14-man rosters?
I think it's a 14-man league.
Yeah, 14 team league.
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's my tiebreaker, because if it's not clear though. If it's 14-man rosters, man, talk about shallow rosters. Give me Miles Sanders. Yeah, I mean, that's a no-brainer. And I like Miles Sanders quite a bit. I'm starting to get caught up in the hype because he's really starting to get hyped up. Although this lower leg injury stuff he's got going on, it has to make us all nervous. But if it's a 14-team league, I'm intrigued enough by that package. I'd probably go with the package, and I bet I'm in the minority here. I'm very curious to see what you guys think, because I think AJ Dillon is a beast. I'm one of those AJ Dillon truthers. I think that he has potential to, I mean, maybe not being running back one in this league, but I think there are some parallels to Derrick Henry. I like AJ Dillon quite a bit. And Jalen Reagor, I think there's tremendous upside with him. I think Justin Jefferson is just going to be this PPR machine. This is a full PPR league. So I like that package. So I think just the fact that it's 14 teams, having that depth on your roster is going to make a difference. If it's a 12-team league, I'd probably go with Sanders. It's real close. I love this tweet because it makes for a really fascinating conversation, because it's tough. I keep going back and forth. But since it's 14 teams, I'm going to go with the package.
All right, Bill, the package or Miles Sanders?
Give me the package. No, I'm indifferent with AJ Dillon. Like, I think, of course, now, like, after photos of his physique have come out, which were the same as they were 6 months ago, but because it's on Twitter and everybody sees it, it bumps his value up. But like, let's remove like that photo from existence. Like, I'm indifferent to AJ Dillon. I like Jefferson slightly more than probably consensus. And then I like Reagor as like the potential like OBJ of this year. So like, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like banking on it, but I'm saying like if there's anybody in this rookie class that's going to be like a uber dynamic wide receiver threat, I think it's him. So like, I like that. I have 0 shares of Miles Sanders. Again, it's the cost compared to like a running back that, we don't know. We can't fully confidently say that he's going to get a ton of volume. I have a hard time spending capital on somebody like that. Like, he may end up being Dalvin Cook, and that's fine. I'm willing to accept that not having him on my team. So if I can get two guys I'm higher on than consensus, and then a running back who may or may not be anything, like, but they did draft him in the second round. Like, was it the second round? Yeah. Like, I mean, I feel pretty good about the haul. And so, yeah, like, just the added depth in a 14-team league is ideal.
So I hate to do this, guys.
You're agreeing?
Yeah, we got to make it 3 for 3, man. I'm going with the package here. Bill, I'm with you. I'm not huge on AJ Dillon. I mean, that man is huge, on every muscle of his body, but I'm not huge on him. But I mean, let's break it down a little bit. He was a second round pick. Both Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones are set to be free agents this year. We already talked about the 150 running backs that are going to be free agents. Maybe they let those two guys go and pick up a Marlon Mack. Just to tie it back to where we were before, as a compliment to AJ Dillon. So maybe AJ Dillon takes as Ryan said, a Derrick Henry type role. Is that kind of a runner. Then we jump to Jalen Reagor. I mean, let's face it. There's not a whole lot to imagine Jalen Reagor being the number one in Philadelphia, tied to Carson Wentz. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but a camp report came out. Jalen Reagor has caught everything that Carson Wentz has thrown. I understand it's hype, but it looks like they are forming that connection quickly, and he can be the number one in Philadelphia, and it's not a real stretch to get there. And then we go to Justin Jefferson, who I had him as wide receiver 3 pre-draft, behind CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. So, and let's face it, I think he is the number 2 for a couple years. But, Adam Thielen is in his 30s already. We can't imagine that he's going for more than 2 or 3 more years at the level that he's been going at. And with his injury history, Justin Jefferson may be thrust into that role quicker than we think. So a lot of high upside talented guys on that rookie package side. And then, Miles Sanders, I know people are hyping him up, but, we have to look at what coaches do and how they use players. And Doug Peterson is a guy who he likes mixing up his running backs. And that's not to say that Miles Sanders is, only set to get, a 40% snap share or 50% snap share, but Boston Scott is going to be a thing. Maybe, I think Corey Clement is still there. Maybe he makes the team, or maybe they sign a guy that another team cuts, and it's a 3-headed monster where Miles Sanders isn't getting as much. So yeah, give me the package. I think there's a lot of upside there, and let's face it, even if one of those things that I talked about comes true, you're probably happy with the trade that you made. So go ahead, Ryan.
I just want to mention with AJ Dillon, and I understand that you guys aren't super high on him, but the man, not only is he a tank, he weighs 250 pounds, but he runs a 4.53. Okay, so he's huge and he's fast. Could he be another Kalen Ballage, also a huge fast guy? It's possible, but I just think there, and I don't think he's going to be much of a pass catcher just based on what he did in college at Boston College. But I mean, I think even starting this year, I mean, he could be the goal line back in Green Bay, and we saw many touchdowns that Aaron Jones scored last year. So I don't know. I think AJ Dillon just I don't want us to sell him too short, because I think he's a super intriguing player. And even if you don't like him in the package, there's always guys like me in your league that you can flip them to me.
Exactly.
So, so I just think and you guys made great cases for Reagor and Justin Jefferson too. Two of my top 4 wide receivers in this draft class, and a loaded wide receiver draft class. So I'm with you. I just think there's a lot of potential, and you're right about what the Eagles have done. Boston Scott is a thing. I totally agree. People talk about there's no one else in Philadelphia, no one else in that backfield. Well, Boston Scott's very talented. Not only, I mean, you saw it last year. You saw it with your own eyes. So it's not just theoretical. And even, I mean, they always bring in somebody, right? I'm trying to think of the names of people that you could have picked up off the waiver wire that you could plug in from that Philadelphia backfield over the past several years. And I can't even think of them. Who was trying to think of the Notre Dame running back?
Not Josh. Josh Adams.
Yeah. I mean, guys like that. So there'll be somebody that, I mean, I think Miles Sanders is going to have a great year, but I just think with the potential of this package, 14-team league, makes sense to go with the package.
I mean, we could go for another hour and a half if we started talking about all of the running backs, out of Philadelphia, Jay Ajayi, Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement. These are all guys under the Doug Peterson regime that have had their time in the sun, a week or two of good fantasy production, just because that's the way that Doug Peterson runs his offense. So that's everything from the timeline. We were out here. We scoured it. It was good to be back. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, man. It was. Oh wait, Bill's got something.
Yeah, let's do Ryan's real quick.
Oh,
Ryan's
you know
tweet.
what? I missed that. That's my
Are you
fault.
okay? You got time, Ryan?
Oh yeah, I've definitely got time. Yeah.
Okay.
I missed that one. I scrolled right by it. All right, so this is from Alexander Coleman at ABC of Fantasy. I've narrowed down the 2020 breakout tight ends to TJ Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith, or Mike Gesicki. If ain't one of them, nobody is breaking out. 2018 was Kittle. 2019 was Andrews. You could probably also put Waller in there. 2020, question mark. We don't know who it's going to be, but he says his money is on Hawkinson or Jonnu. So Ryan, since you brought this to the table, we're gonna let you go last. Bill, who's your breakout tight end, even if it's not one of the guys listed?
Okay, so I haven't even thought of this until I just read this. So this just shows you how prepared I am. But okay. Both of those tight ends I was high on entering their second year. I have a lot of Kittle. I have a lot of Andrews. So there's kind of a thing. If you see a tight end in his rookie year get 500 to 600 yards his rookie year, you can kind of think he's going to progress into being a tight end that's going to be somebody you're okay having on your team. And that's both what Kittle and Andrews did. Now, in this list, there was none of those guys, but Hawkinson, if you prorate based on his games played, then he is in that area. So of those three, I'm picking Hawkinson. Jonnu played most of the season last year without Delaney Walker. So there shouldn't really be a bump this year because he doesn't have Delaney Walker. Gesicki, I mean, he's uber athletic. I'm just not sure he's a great football player. And I need to see it before I believe it that he's going to get a ton of targets in the offense with, oh my God, what's his name? The former, the offensive coordinator there, Chan Gailey. Thank you.
Yeah.
So of the three, I'm betting on Hawkinson. And yes, I am a Lions fan, but this is absolutely not a homer thing. You could also go with Noah Fant because he's very much like if you prorate Hawkinson, he matches up basically with what Fant did last year. So if I'm betting on any tight ends this season, it's Fant and Hawkinson.
Yeah, and Bill, you're always coming with the hot stats. You said you weren't prepared, but obviously you had that great tight end stat ready to go. So I'm going to go off the list. I'm also going to go against Bill's well-researched stat. But I'm going to go with Irv Smith Jr. Again, another ultra-athletic guy. Bill says I'm wrong, but Bill knows we're a very pro Irv Smith podcast, so don't slander his name now. I think he has all the tools to be, big time. You talked about it with Gesicki, Irv Smith, ultra talented. I think he does everything well on the field, and maybe with with Diggs out of town, he can scoop up some more targets and get in there. But if I could only pick off of the 3 names that were on the list, I would have to agree with Bill. T.J. Hawkinson, he showed that he could do it in the league. I mean, week 1, what was he, 6 for 131 and a touchdown or something like that? I mean, he balled out game 1 and just kind of, put the league on notice. And yeah, I know it didn't really materialize after that. There were some injuries involved, but he at least proved that he has the talent to do it. So Irv Smith, if I can pick from anyone, but if I'm picking from the list, I'm gonna go T.J. Hawkinson. All right, Ryan, wrap us up with some great knowledge.
Yeah, I think if you're picking from the list, I think you go with Hawk. I am curious. I don't know if we have time to get into this, but one thing that worries me a little bit about him is just the reports of his ankle injury, that he's still recovering from that ankle injury. That makes me a little bit nervous. But I think that he fits that. We've seen this. Going back to Kittle and Andrews, we've had these second-year guys that have broken out, and he's the second-year guy on the list. And Irv Smith is certainly an interesting call too. About a couple of months ago on the Fantasy Joes, we had on a couple of guys, Andrew Mancini, creator of the footballpot.com, and Jacob Vines, who's a writer for Dynasty Nerds. And these guys are really big into 2 tight end leagues, and the whole show is about 2 tight end leagues. And Irv Smith Jr., his name came up again and again and again. And it seems like in the 2 tight end community, people love Irv Smith Jr. I think in terms of vacated targets with the Vikings, I think they're a ton. They're probably middle of the pack. I think it was 110 vacated targets last time I looked, if memory serves. But I do think that someone is going to emerge in Minnesota. You've got obviously Dalvin Cook, you've got Adam Thielen, and who's going to be like that third guy in line? It could be Justin Jefferson, who we talked about, but it could be Irv Smith Jr. So I think Irv Smith Jr. has a chance to take a step forward. And Hawk, if he's healthy, gosh, I mean, the guy is just, really a complete tight end. So if I'm going to bet, I probably would bet on Hawkinson. But I think Irv Smith Jr. is certainly wouldn't surprise him if he emerged as well.
It's funny you mentioned Jacob. Him and I chat on Twitter all the time, and I'm actually in a league with him that I commissioned. I just searched real quick to see who had Irv Smith because I knew I didn't have him. So I said, you know what? I bet you Jacob has him. He doesn't have him either, actually. But I was banking that, I have Irv in a lot of spots. And it's funny because scrolling down, I read your answer and then saw you had Irv Smith too. So I thought it was kind of funny that we agreed without me even really reading ahead because I don't read. So, but yeah, so some real good choices there. And that's kind of the cool thing about tight end, and that's why I this year a lot have punted the position early, and I've just kind of gone for the scatter shot approach towards the end and picked up a lot of young guys like your Jonnu Smiths and your Ian Thomases and Mike Gesicki's and stuff like that. Because I mean, history shows there's probably going to be another guy that is more in that tight end 12 to 18 range in ADP that kind of breaks out and blows up. So real great way. We're to end the show, the actual ending of the show, not whatever I was trying to do a few minutes ago. So Ryan, man, thank you so much for coming on, man. It was a blast having you on. I'm gonna let you tell everybody where they can find you and what you're doing.
Thanks, guys. No, my pleasure. I'm sorry I was late. Once again, bedtime sometimes is out of your control.
Get it.
So I'm at Roto Librarian on Twitter. I'm a co-host of the Fantasy Joes podcast. That's at FF Joes on Twitter. I do that with Will Greenwood. He's my co-host, and that's where I'm at. In terms of shout outs, I mentioned it earlier. I just wanted to, give a shout out to the IDP guys because I'm in the IDP guys Invitational. They're raising money for Autism Speaks. They're really close to their goal. So if you check that out, if you check out their website, it's a fun tournament. I always like to promote IDP because talking about keeping things fresh in your leagues. If you're, you guys do Superflex, and that's not really a new fresh thing anymore. But try 2 tight ends, try IDP leagues. It's a lot of fun, and I was thrilled to be invited to that invitational, and I think that'll be fun. So thanks, guys. Yeah, check out the Fancy Joes. Hope to have you guys on there sometime.
Anytime, Ryan, hit us up. We'll be honored to go on. And I want to shout it out too. If you're not subscribing and listening to Fantasy Joe's, I'm gonna piss Bill off right now and say you're doing it wrong. Go listen. I mean, not only is the show super informational, but uh, it's a fun show too. It's a great listen every time you get that in your feed. So do that. I just want to shout you guys out because I'm a listener. I love the show.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
It's one of my favorites. And you know, if you're listening to us, appreciate it. You know, we had the chat was lit today, man. We had J Mike Rocky was just peppering us with all kinds of cool stuff. Steve Dennis was hitting me up. He was giving me some crap for swimming before coming on the pod. Dynasty Outhouse was out here a little bit. Lindsay Kennedy was out there. You know, a lot of other people are in and out. I love the chat. If you want to watch this live, you know, go to YouTube, search the DAP Network, the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network on YouTube. Subscribe and hit the bell. Not only will you get us, you get occasional episodes of Trade Addicts, and you know, a whole bunch of other stuff is getting thrown on there. It's a good follow. If you're listening to us on podcasts, you know, we appreciate you guys too. You know, an hour and a half, man, that's a lot to take out of your day to listen to us. So we do appreciate it. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe if you're not. Tell a friend. Like Bill said earlier, you know, if you put that rate and review out there, he had some dope cards that he was flashing during the beginning. A Calvin Ridley, a Zeke Elliott. I'm sure there are some other Stone Cold studs. And we're gonna pick. You're gonna have to tell me who it is. Too small for me.
No, Adrian Peterson.
AP. I mean, the guy's been good for my entire lifetime. So he, you know, send it to us. We're gonna pick a person or two and send some stuff out to them. So on that note, Bill, we're out of here.
Late.